Welcome to Working Towards Our Purpose, a podcast that offers a different perspective on what a job can be. For everyone out there that's heard that voice in the back of their head asking for something more, it's time to listen to it. I'm your host, Gino, and join me as I interview people who have decided to work in their own purpose. Together, we will learn, become inspired, and hopefully find our own path towards working in our purpose. Joining me today on Working Towards Our Purpose is my friend Phil Restivo. He's a plumber who owns his own business. He also has multiple rental properties that he owns and takes care of. But most of all, he has a thirst for knowledge and always wanting to learn new things and to push himself forward. Welcome to the podcast. Why don't we start by you telling me a little bit about your background and your schooling and how you grew up?
Sure. So, I went to middle school and it was time to go to high school. And you know how in middle school you have like a shop class? I don't know if you had it, but we had
I did.
metal and woodworking. I really enjoy working with my hands. And when I heard that there's a school you can go to where half the year you're doing that kind of stuff and the other half of the year you're doing academic stuff, I'm like, oh, this is like a get out of work free card right here. So I was kind of like, sign me up. And at the time, because you have to apply to go to a tech school, I thought it was better than a public school because you have to apply to get in. But realistically, it's not at all. But it did teach me a trade, which was awesome. So I only had to do academics for half the year, which was also awesome. But there's downfalls. You know, there's not many girls in school. So that was a bit of a downfall. And also coming from growing up in an area like Wallingford and then going into a school in Meriden was kind of a culture shock for me. You know, I used to think like, oh, people that smoke cigarettes, like you're bad. And then I go into this Meriden school and like people are doing drugs in the hallway and stuff. And I just felt so out of place. And, you know, the first year I was actually considering going back to like leaving the tech school and just going to a public school. But it actually shaped me a lot because you get to meet these kids that are outside your comfort zone and you realize, you know, they're not bad people. They just had different circumstances growing up. And so it taught me a lot as far as like being grateful and appreciative for certain things. Like I remember, you know, making friends with, you know, somebody and going to his house and, you know, they're all pitching in for groceries and stuff. And they leave their ovens open to keep the house and stuff. And that was like crazy to me. I didn't realize like how good I have it before seeing that firsthand. So I'm happy that I ended up going that route because it puts things into perspective. So anyways, I went to trade school. Had no idea what I wanted to do. The first year you kind of go through each trade for a couple of weeks and then you have to pick one for the next 3 years. And I kind of just chose plumbing because a couple of my friends were in it. I thought soldering pipes was cool and stuff, but it really I didn't grow up wanting to be a plumber or anything. I didn't know what I want. So I graduated in 2008 and all my friends, I still had a lot of friends that were in like Wallingford public schools and, you know, they're all going to college. And I felt like, geez, if I don't go to college, I'm going to be a nobody. Like I have to get a good job. And because, you know, growing up, like your parents and everybody drills into you, you know, you got to go to college to make a living and everything. And so I felt I was nervous. Like, how am I going to go to college when I felt like all my friends were smarter than me too, because the academic program at a tech school isn't as strong as one in a public school. So I wanted to go to college. I was interested in probably like mechanical engineering or something, but I had no idea, what to do, like how to go to college, how I was going to pay for it. I didn't really have anyone to push me or like walk me through that process. So, needless to say, I never got into any colleges. I was into cars at the time and, souping them up. And then I liked art as well. So I got the idea like, hey, maybe if I combine these two things, like art and auto, you know, I could do something. So I ended up going to a technical college, Lincoln Tech, for 2 years and got a certificate in auto body and I learned how to paint and do some airbrushing and stuff like that. So that was like a phase of my life I went through where super into cars. I rented a space in Durham. I had like a garage that I was doing side work out of and just working on cars all the time, painting cars and got into racing, doing all this like street racing, speeding all the time. I got a bunch of tickets. I got my license suspended. And every plumbing job I applied to, they turned me down because they couldn't afford to insure me to drive their vehicles. So I had no choice. I couldn't get a job. And so that's what kind of led me down the route. Let me get into auto body because I actually enjoy working with cars. And I thought by adding my artistic side to it, maybe I could do custom paint jobs or something like that. 5 years later, I worked at a bunch of different body shops and kind of jumped around, worked my way up. But another thing that I thought about was, the highest paid guy in the shop is making like 28, $30 an hour. I didn't like the fact that I'm going to have a cap. Like I'm going to bust my ass for all these years and then that's the most I'm going to make. I did out the math and it was like, we're going to make 70,000 a year or something. And like growing up, you always think like everybody's got these aspirations like, oh, I want to make 100 grand a year. And that just seems like a ton of money. And and then when I felt like I couldn't reach that by staying in auto body, I realized, this isn't for me. And also, like I said, it was very repetitive. I was getting like sinus infections all the time from all the dusty breathing. It wasn't good for my health. So I sold all my cars. I used to have like 4 cars at a time, like cheap cars I'd buy and soup up, fix them up. But yeah, I sold them all because they kept getting me in trouble. Cleaned up my driving record, and a buddy of mine was actually going to travel the country, and he was giving up his plumbing job and kind of put a good word in for me. So he got me the job, and I started off at this company. I actually took like a $4 an hour pay cut to go back to plumbing, but I was more focused on, the long run. I knew it was going to pay off in the long run. So even if I took a pay cut, at least I'm getting experience. I could put my hours from school to work and kind of build myself that way.
So was that your internship that you had to then get a job for? Like, how do apprenticeships work in a trades? Because I always thought they were like unpaid. So basically you just like applied for a job and then they paid you, but you also got your hours?
Yeah. So there's a lot of rules with the apprenticeship program. So you can work for most trades. You would get a job with a company in that trade, and then they have to sign you up for the apprenticeship program so your hours actually count. And I think it costs them, so much money and they gotta fulfill like so many requirements. Like they have to have so many licensed guys to so many apprentices. They gotta give you so many hours a year, stuff like that. So I worked for this guy for about a year and he actually never signed me up for my apprenticeship. So I kind of I was upset because I wasted a year of my life and none of those hours counted. And 10,000 hours ends up being 5 years. You got to work for somebody just to get your license. And once you get your license, that's when you're making like 25 bucks an hour. So I'm like, I don't want to wait 5 years to make 25 bucks an hour. So, it was frustrating. But after I left that company, I went to another plumbing company that signed me up right away because I told them, listen, I'm not going to start working until you sign this paper. And they were a great company. They signed me up right away. And they taught me a lot. I learned a lot from them. And yeah, fast forward 4 years after that, I was able to get I sat for my test and got my license, which for us tradesmen, it's equivalent to like a bachelor's degree, because not only do you need schooling, but you need on the job training. And you can't even like some people think like, oh, can you just fudge the hours? You really can't because it honestly takes that many hours to feel comfortable with what you're actually doing. And they do say that in any business book you read, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something, right? So it is true when it comes to trades as well.
Mm.
Finished my apprenticeship with them, sat for my license. I got my license, and I worked for them for another year. And I asked for a pay raise, and they didn't want to give me a pay raise. And I I knew that it didn't seem like because I was doing all the work. I felt like, why am I making money for these guys when I'm literally doing everything? Like I could just do this for myself. And I basically applied for a bunch of other jobs and got another offer for a lot more money. And I told them like, hey, listen, I got to give them 2 weeks because, I got a better offer somewhere else. They tried to match it. And I kind of told them no thanks and went with this new company. And the new company was actually slow. They paid me better, but they didn't have a lot of plumbing work. So in the downtime, not only did they do plumbing, but they also did bathroom remodels. So in the downtime, I was helping these carpenters redo these bathrooms, and I learned how to tile. I learned how to hang doors and do trim work and do sheetrock. So I learned how to fully remodel things in just a few short months at this company, and that was very valuable to me because at that time I I was interested in real estate, and I got on the forums. I basically I Googled how to become rich because I was so sick of like people screwing me over on my hours and then people not wanting to pay me what I was worth. And then you see all these things on TV and all these people you look up to and they're driving nice cars and stuff. And you're like, it almost feels unattainable. So I started Googling how to become rich, how to become rich. Everything I read online kept pointing to real estate. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I looked at a lot of the most successful people in the world, and all of them are involved in real estate. So I'm like, okay, I got to start learning more about this. And when I started reading, everybody was about flipping houses. Like now it's become like a new fad almost, where everybody wants to flip a house, but nobody knows what they're doing. They just watch these HD TV shows and they just think, oh, this is going to be fun. I'm just going to paint some walls and make a ton of money. But it's not like that at all, obviously. And I'm sure people are learning that the hard way. But yeah, I had these aspirations on flipping the house. I started doing a bunch of research and I started, rather than waking up every morning and going on Facebook or something, I was looking at the MLS every single day, and I got to know towns inside and out. If a house came up for sale, I knew it within the first hour, and I knew I got familiar with, what were good deals and what were bad deals because I just saw what things were selling for because I was looking at it every single day. But it took me a long time. Like I was stuck in this like analysis paralysis where I never actually took action. I just kept doing all this research and at the same time I'm working for this company, I'm learning how to rehab houses. And I felt like I had all the know-how, but I was still afraid to like pull trigger on it. And the other thing with that was I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I was making like $400 a week, and I was able to save up $20,000, and that's all I had to my name. I didn't have a retirement or any type of stocks or anything like that. I just had a savings account and a checking account, and I had about 10 grand in each. So I decided to quit my job and travel for a few months. Just stayed in hostels and stayed at friends' houses and just traveled the country for about 3 months. And it cost me about like $4,000. I wasn't sure if I was going to come home or not. I just needed a change, really. And when I came back, I felt like I didn't want to go and work for somebody again because I felt like I knew how to do everything better than them. And so I'm like, why am I doing all this work so they can make money? I could just do this for myself. And I had no clue how to start a business.
I do want to ask you about that trip though, because I think that's maybe a crucial like pivoting moment. Because so it sounds like you were working for these people making like okay money, right? But like doing all the work and realizing that you're the one doing all the work and not getting paid for it. And then you basically started researching real estate and looking up, familiarizing yourself with that whole new industry. And then you just quit your job out of nowhere. And like, what'd you do on those 3 months? Like, was it self-exploration? Like what inspired that? You were just so burnt out that you had to, or?
Yeah, actually, I've always been like an open-minded person and love traveling, always wanted to travel. And, you see all these people posting on social media, they're like traveling. And you think, oh, how are these people doing it? Like, I want to go travel. I want to travel. Finally, I had some money saved up and like, I've been thinking about it, but I probably never would have done it until my best friend actually was moving to California to be with his girlfriend because she got a good job out there. And he didn't have a job at the time. And he said, hey, I'm driving out there. It'd be awesome if you can drive with me and we could take our time, stop wherever we want on the way. And it sounded like a great thing, but at the same time, I felt like can't do that. Like that's a fantasy. Like I got to keep working and doing all this. And then just one day, I remember I was at work. It was like snowing, and my boss sent me on some job, and nothing was ready for me. I'm all by myself, and I was just kind of like fed up with it. And I'm like, I know that I could do better than this, and I'm about to miss this opportunity. My friend was leaving the next day because I procrastinate a lot, and like I said, I never really took action. I studied things, but I would never do anything about it. And basically, he called me up that day and he's like, "Hey, I was just seeing like I'm leaving tomorrow. Did you want to come or not?" And it just kind of it sat there with me. And I was at this house in the freezing cold and just miserable. And at the time, I went through a recent breakup as well. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. So I left the job early. We're supposed to work until like 4 or 5 o'clock. I ended up leaving around 2, and I packed up all my stuff, drove the van back to the shop, and left it there. And I sent a text to my boss, and I said, "Hey, thank you for the opportunity, but I had a little bit of a revelation, and I'm going to take some time off to travel, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience I've caused you. And basically, I told my parents that night because I was still living with my parents. And I was like, hey, I think I'm going to go leave and travel for a few months. And I didn't really know if I was coming back. I was like, I'm open to living somewhere else and trying something new. And so obviously they weren't very happy about that. They were pretty upset. But I packed a backpack that night and we said our goodbyes and we got in the car with my friend and we just took off. But then throughout that trip, I guess I thought I was going to find myself, or I'd find like this awesome place to live. Like I always thought California would be cool because the weather's nice and all the stuff. But then after spending enough time in different places, like you start to realize all places have their pros and cons, and the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It honestly made me appreciate a lot of the stuff that I had here, a lot of the connections and friendships, and like knowing the holes in the wall and stuff like that. It takes time to like establish that, and it's hard to give that up because it's comfortable, I guess. But I always like to challenge my comfort. If I'm in the same place for too long, I have to like do something different. So, anyways, yeah, I traveled and came to that realization where, okay, like I had a good time. There's no place in particular that I really wanted to move. And, I missed my friends and I came back. And yeah, when I came back, like I said, I didn't want to work for someone else again because it just didn't make sense to me.
So is that when you started your own business? So you came back and tried to find clients. What was that like?
Yeah. So again, I went on to Google and I said how to start my own business. And and then I started reading about LLCs and S corps and C corps and familiarized myself with it and figured out, okay, this is the easiest way and the most common way to do this. And here's the tax benefits for doing it this way versus that way. So I learned a lot through self exploration. And I basically filed all the paperwork online for my LLC myself and figured it out. It really wasn't that difficult. And, you pay a couple $100 in fees and make a trade name and boom, I had an LLC. And now it's like, okay, now what? What do I do now? Well, I need to get a van. So I reached out to some of the guys that I knew at the old company, and they're like, "Hey, we got this old van sitting at the shop. You should see if you could buy it off the boss." So I reached out to the boss and asked him if I could buy it, and he was happy to get rid of it and sold it to me for like $1,500. So because I knew how to work on cars, I fixed it up, and I put shelves in it and got it all set up. And yeah, so then I basically just started telling everybody. I just started reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, I could fix this," or if you know someone that needs plumbing work. And I started slowly building a customer base, and then word of mouth just spread so quickly. Because at the time, you know, plumbers were hard to come by.
Hmm. So when you first like thought about getting work, I mean, at least for me, it was like in my field, I would just basically would do anything that people would pay me for. Was that a similar for you? Like you would just kind of do any job that people would pay you for? Did you think about like trying to do the thing that you wanted to do or like to pigeonhole yourself into one thing, or did you experience something similar?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was taking anything and everything that I could get, right, just to get my name out there and to just make some money because I was broke.
Right.
So I started, like, I would install mirrors and door handles and like, but mostly I tried to do plumbing work, and I would introduce myself as a plumber. I wouldn't say, "Hey, I'm a carpenter or do everything type person. So I guess what happened is my mentor, which was a good friend of mine's father who owned a plumbing company in town, I would help him on the side. And he taught me so much, and he was been like a mentor to me ever since. He would throw me some work on the side. And not only that, if I ever had a question, I was able to go to him for advice. And that was huge because in the beginning, you think you know a lot until all the responsibility falls on you and something comes up, but you got nobody to ask to, how do I solve this problem? And I was fortunate enough to have this mentor of mine help me, and he would always have a way out and let me borrow tools if I needed them, and yeah, he really got me on my feet. So I have to definitely give a shout out to him, Richard Charlie from R&M Plumbing. So he's a great guy.
Hmm. How did you initially get hooked up with him? Because I hear like a lot of people saying that they had like a good mentor that they could rely on and this and that. But I guess I've never found myself in a situation where I've like found that sort of relation. Like, do you ask somebody to be your mentor? Like, how does that work?
No, no, like, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with him saying, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" It
Right.
just our relationship kind of unfolded basically because one of my best friends dated his daughter, and we were all in the same friend group, and we would hang out a lot. And she mentioned to her dad that I went to school for plumbing, and he would need a helper sometimes on some jobs. So he would reach out to me and ask me if I wanted to help him on a job. And, I took every opportunity I can get to make a little bit of side money. And I really enjoyed working with him because he's, uh, he's very, he's very intelligent, and he's also, a patient person. And I think looking back on the work I used to do and with my ADD and stuff, I would forget so many things. And it kind of like, I could see why people have gotten frustrated with me in the past, like bosses that I've worked for. And because now I deal with the same thing, and I get frustrated with people that work for me, but I know what it's like now. And so I envy him because he never got frustrated with me. And if he did, he was always tactful with the way he, worded things. And it kind of motivated me to want to try harder. Where the other people, like, they'd yell at you, and you'd lose your confidence, and you'd lose your momentum, and just it makes you want to like resent them and rebel and stuff. Where this guy, he really like builds you up, and just makes you want to try harder. And I think I needed that because it pushed me to become a better person.
Mm, yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool that you like found somebody to be able to instill that. Because I totally agree. Like, there's different types of, disciplinary styles, I guess. But the person that's like patient with you is the person that you don't want to disappoint, which then makes you try harder to not disappoint them. Whereas if you just get yelled at, you're like, all right, well, I don't care about you anymore. So whatever you're saying doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So that sounds like something that was like really beneficial to you and your business. So what did the start and like to where you're at now with your business, like how you said that you had people working for you. At what point did you get enough work to have people to come on? And at what point did you like find your identity as a business?
Yeah. So working in the companies, the other plumbing companies, when I was working for them, I made a few close friends that continued to work for them. But, I was able to call them up and say, "Hey, I got this really big job. I need a little bit of help on it." And I'd pay them on the side. And then it became a more regular thing as, once you get in with a couple contractors or a couple builders and you're giving you continuous work, and then those people refer you, it just takes off really quickly and almost too quickly. I feel like I wasn't prepared for the amount of workload that I was taking on. So I felt like I was consistently reaching out to these people to help me out. And then finally I'm like, you know, I got to hire somebody because this is just getting too much. And there is that fear that, like, what if I get slow and what if I can't keep them working? But the other thing you got to keep in mind is I never had to advertise. I never, everything's word of mouth. So if I do get slow, that's the time where I can take that time to advertise. And that's when I started getting into real estate as well. So I'm like, oh, well, if we get slow, I'll have them help me out with the houses that I'm rehabbing. I should probably touch up on that because I'll stop.
Yeah. So at what point did you get involved in real estate? Like you got your business going, right? And that's going well. At what point did you first get into real estate?
Yeah. So everything kind of took off for me when I was 28. So like I said, I got my plumbing license when I was 24, and I stayed with that company for a couple years, and then I jumped to that other company that taught me how to do bathroom remodels. And during that whole time, since I was probably 21, I've just been researching real estate constantly, and like I said, scouring the MLS every day. And I was listening to podcasts to and from work every day, and I just felt like I was drinking from a fountain of gold. Like I was just retaining all the information where normally, because of my ADD, I don't retain a lot of information if I'm reading a book or something. But I was so fixated on this, and I found it fascinating. So it was good to do all that. But like I said, I didn't make any moves until as soon as I got back from that trip where I thought I was going to find myself. And I felt like I came back and I was kind of in the same position. I got nothing really changed. But looking back, a lot changed because when I came back, I knew that I didn't want to work for somebody. So that same year, not only did I start my plumbing business, not only did I travel the country, but I also took every dollar I had and invested it into this house that I was going to flip. So, yeah, basically, I started doing plumbing work for this kid who is actually a year younger than me. And he owned like 11 properties. And he was just crushing it. And he was a nurse. And I was like, oh my God, I want to be like this dude. So I would ask him a bunch of questions. And he also wholesaled properties. And I told him, I really want to get into this and blah, blah, blah. And he told me about hard money because I'm like, how'd you get the money to do this? And he said, well, I use hard money. And I'm like, well, what's hard money? And those of you that don't know, you know, hard money is just it's a loan you can get that's all cash. And you don't need, sometimes they require you to put up collateral, but it's a high interest loan and it's a short term. So basically, it's scary because, you're paying 12% interest and you got to pay them back within a year. So this kid was wholesaling the house and he said, hey, I got this property. I just have too much going on right now. And, are you interested in buying it? And rather than him take a wholesaling fee for it, he said, why don't you do some plumbing work on one of my other properties and we'll call it even on the fee. So I said, okay. So I bought this house for $101,000. And obviously I didn't have that. I had 20 grand to my name. So in order to get the hard money loan, I was fortunate enough to have my parents co-sign for me, and they actually had to put up their house as collateral on this loan. So basically, the hard money lender put a lien against my parents' house until they're paid off. So yeah, I had to put 20 grand down because they let me borrow 90% of the the cost of the property, which was 101. And then there's all these fees and that. And then they also funded the full rehab cost, which I sort of knew what I was doing, but I didn't know exactly. But I walked through the house and kind of made a scope of work and was like, I think it needs about 20 to 25 grand worth of work. So they were willing to fund me for 130 grand or something. So basically, I got the loan, I bought the house, and I started working there every single night. And it was probably the most stressful and hardest I've ever worked in my life because I'd work all day doing plumbing and then I'd go straight to the house and work all night every single day for 5 months. And it got old really fast, because your friends are going out to the bar and like inviting you out. And I have to tell them, I can't, because I was afraid of what's going to happen if I don't pay this hard money lender back. I was scared and I knew if I just put in the effort on this one, I was looking at this. I didn't even care if I failed. I just knew this was going to be such a good learning experience for me. And there's no way I could fail. I can't even explain to you. Like my mindset was just like, I wasn't going to let myself fail no matter what happened. So I was there every single night from say 5 o'clock to 10 p.m. And I completely rehabbed the house by myself and got it done in about 4 months and got it listed and sold it for 196,000. And I had about 30 grand, not even 30, I'd say like 27 grand in like rehab costs. When I sold the house, I made about 34 grand in profit. And so I got my initial investment back plus 34 grand. So suddenly, I got 60 grand sitting in my bank. And it's like the most amount of money I've ever had in my life. And I was like, holy shit, I got to keep doing this because this, but I was also like, this was a really hard work though. So how am I going to do this more efficiently? After that, I got hooked. And every plumbing job that I went to, I would talk to the customer and be like, hey, do you know anyone looking to sell a house that needs work? Because, I'm getting into flipping houses and I'm looking for a fixer upper. And finally, I happened to came across an older couple. She had a leak in her bathroom and she was going to file a insurance claim. And she was actually crying to me while I was there because she's like, I have to move to Germany in a month and I got to sell this house. And I don't know how I'm going to sell it because it needs all this work. And I was like, well, maybe I can buy it. And we walked around the house. She showed me the house and it needed a lot of work. Her husband died and she she was moving in with her daughter in Germany and just she was kind of stuck. She felt stuck. So I kind of was offering a solution that was good for the both of us. So I asked her, what do you think the house is worth? I'm like walking around, it needs about $100,000 worth of work. And she said, well, how about 85 grand? And instantly I was like, okay, I'll take it. And I had no clue how I was going to fund it or anything, but I knew that was a good deal because again, I was constantly looking at the market and knew what things were worth. My parents saw how successful I was with the first property that they were interested in getting involved. So I said, look, what if you guys loan me this money and I'll pay you 10% interest rather than pay this hard money? And they were like, okay, they were all for it. And because, you can't put your money in, I mean, you could put your money into the stock market and stuff, but, it's average, 7% or something. So to them, it was like a win-win, and they knew I was capable of doing it. And they didn't have 85 grand sitting there. They actually had to take out a HELOC on their house. So, but the HELOC was a really low interest rate at the time. So I paid the extra cost of that. And then I gave them 10% when I was finished. But what I learned on the first house, I should have never, there's two things I learned. I made 34 grand, but then I'm looking at, that's because I had to pay the real estate agent. He made 13 grand to list my house and sell it. And I'm like, well, if I cut him out, like if I sold the house myself, I would have made, you know, 47 grand. And that's a lot more money than 34. So I was kind of thinking about that. And so I looked in, well, what does it take to get my real estate license? And then it's like, oh, there's a 2 nights a week. And you take this course for a couple months, pay $500 to get this license. That's a no brainer because I'm looking at it like, okay, I'm going to spend a couple $1,000s for this license, but any property I buy instantly pays for itself because I'm saving all this commission costs. And I knew I was going to continue to buy more properties. Plus, I wanted access to MLS to like, I was having trouble because I was trying to find more deals and I was talking to realtors, but the realtors, like, they weren't as attentive as I wanted. Like they weren't pulling comps and they didn't set up like filters on the MLS that I wanted. I wanted I wanted to know the ins and outs of the transaction so that I can cut as many people out as possible. I'll be the first one there. I could have the best offer. So that's what I did. I went to school for the real estate and got my license in a couple months. And then I just like kicked into overdrive. And, you know, that year I bought 3 houses. And like I said, I became obsessed. And this is kind of a thing with people that have ADD. We get obsessed over things and then we'll get bored of them. So it's like we can hyper focus really well on certain things, or we can be scatter minded and not focus very well on things we're not interested in. So at this time, it was like I was just riding the wave. Interest rates were low. I was hyper focused on real estate. I went, got my license. Just started buying up everything I can. And I started just shopping around on Craigslist and finding the cheapest people I could to do the work. But then you run to like, things don't get done the right way. And so you kind of have to like micromanage people. And, the whole thing was a learning process. But yeah, and then at the same time, I'm, running the plumbing business and I got a guy working for me there. And it was difficult to balance everything. And it kind of forced me to learn how to be more organized because I wasn't the most organized person. But yeah.
I think the first thought that comes to my head is, so you're flipping more and more houses and you're doing more and more work on it. To me, it's like you have this business that does plumbing, but it also does other stuff. How come, like, did the thought ever enter your mind of like having your business just rehab these houses and kind of like shift what the business does?
Yeah. So that's what I still want to be honest.
Okay.
But the first house that I flipped, I learned a lot on. Not only did I learn like, oh, let me cut the realtor out to save on commission fees, but I read a couple more books off Bigger Pockets. I read the BRRRR strategy, which is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And basically, I thought to myself, I should have never sold that house. I should have did a cash out refinance, and I would have gotten the same amount. I would have had 34 grand back in my pocket, but I would have kept the house and made money each month off of it. I'm an idiot. So The second house that I bought was a two family. And I knew, I'm like, when I'm done with this one, I'm renting it out and I'm refinancing it. So that's what I did. I bought that house for 85 grand, and I I put about 65 grand into it, and then I refinanced it for 296. So I pulled a ton of equity out of that. And I was able to pay my parents off plus the 10%. And then I purchased another house in Cheshire, and I was able to cover all the rehab costs. So rather than use a hard money lender on this one, I actually got a traditional mortgage on this one with a low interest rate, and I funded the rehab myself. So I was cutting out all these fees, and it was kind of like a snowball effect at that point. And then, same thing in this house in Cheshire. I put about 55 grand into that house, bought that house for 145,000, and I cashed out, refinanced that house for 310,000. So again, it just kept like putting more and more money into my pocket. And then I bought another, and then another, and I just kept going. I started to slow down because interest rates started to rise, right? And I was getting panicky, like, well, I can't keep refinancing out of these if the interest rate's going to be high, because then I won't be cash flowing anything. So I was kind of like, you know, people were talking like, oh, the interest rate's going to go up 3 points over the next year. So I'm like, I have to buy as much as possible now. So rather than buying fixer uppers, I bought two of the houses I bought were turnkey. And I don't regret doing that, but it may not have been the smartest decision I've made, because had I not, if I bought two more fixer uppers, I could have pulled a lot more cash out and continued buying more properties. But because those properties cost a lot more because they were turnkey, it tied up all my cash. So now I'm currently sitting at seven properties, and most of my money is tied up. And I have enough money in the bank for, I try to keep like 10% for each property to, in case anything goes wrong. But so I'm not like dead broke, but I put these limits for myself so I don't get into sticky positions. But right now I've been a little stagnant the past year because I don't have that extra cash to purchase another property.
Does that also have something to do with like the way that the housing market is? And like, I mean, I'm thinking, like you mentioned before, you not having as much drive to want to do it, maybe that changing, and then also just the housing market changing itself. Is it something that has slowed down or not become as feasible? Because I'm imagining people like listening to you being like, oh, can I do that right now? Like, is it possible to even do that at this point in time?
Yeah, it is possible for sure. And I think the important thing is you need to know when to pivot and change your strategy. So like, I got in at a good time, and I was capitalizing. I was buying three houses a year, and really grew really quick. But then I came to a halt where I should have like really, because I read a lot about it, but I didn't actually take action on some of the things where, okay, like the market's changing a bit. Maybe I should change up my strategy. Maybe I should start looking for different things. So, like I said, what I did was I bought those. I was so desperate to buy whatever I could while the interest rates were low, and rather than wait for a deal to come along, I just ended up buying these two turnkey properties that tied up a lot of my cash. They cash flow very well, but unfortunately, I'm not pulling any money out of them right away. I could take out like HELOCs on all the properties and have enough money to do something with. I've just kind of I'm at a point where I'm comfortable again, I guess. And also I've been working really hard and I kind of just need a break because I'm trying to balance too many things at once. And I think it's important to take time to yourself and, I can't sit if I'm comfortable for too long, I get antsy. I got to step out of my comfort zone. So right now, I'm just trying to enjoy the comfort and relax for a little bit. Take a little time to myself. But I'm definitely gonna go hard again in a few months, probably. I got other things going on. With my fiance that moved over here, and we're getting married soon. And I got to prepare for that. So once all that stuff is passed, I'll probably get back into the groove and keep cranking.
So you think that you will get back into real estate and back into buying more houses? Is that still something that like you have a drive for?
Yeah, so definitely 100%. But I kind of want to take it to the next level. Like it's kind of like, after you do it a few times, it's like, okay, been there, done that. Like I want to go bigger, right? So I'm looking to get into a commercial property. I'm interested in getting into like a small apartment building or something like that. And I've been thinking more and more about liquidating my whole portfolio into like one big commercial building. So that's a thought of mine, but I've also been hooking up with a lot of different investors as well and focusing on building relationships with people that I could then utilize in the future for other deals that come my way. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, because I imagine having, you said 7 properties that you have. Like, how do you have time to manage all of that plus still do your business? Like, what is what does a day look like for you?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like a lot from this end.
Yeah. So it's not terrible because the thing is, because I'm rehabbing these properties, everything's brand new. So I'm not getting a lot of like calls like, oh, this is leaking or this isn't working because everything's brand new. What's going to go wrong? Trust me, stuff still goes wrong. And it is a pain in the ass to deal with, but it kind of puts you ahead of, the people that buy like rundown properties and they do the bare minimum and then they're just getting calls every other day. I knew I didn't want a business strategy like that. And trust me, they're still making money. It's just more of a headache. I wanted something more hands off. So by putting, new appliances and having all new fixtures and stuff, all new plumbing, it kind of eliminates a lot of those problems that people have in the future.
Another thing that comes to mind as you're talking about like, taking it to the next level, getting a commercial space or something even bigger. What does it feel like in your mind, like the first time that you went to buy your house and like how scary it was to get that first loan and now look at yourself and think I'm going to go buy this like, huge thing with all my assets or something. Like do you think about like the difference between how you felt then and how you feel now?
Yeah, definitely. So another big thing I've learned is like take what people say with a grain of salt because so many people have told me no, or that's not going to work, or you can't do this. And they're just wrong because, and I've read this a lot in books and I kind of didn't believe it until I've experienced it firsthand. You might get 10 people that tell you no, but then the 11th person says yes, and that's referring to like lenders and stuff. You feel like you can't find a lender that will do a certain deal or give you a certain rate. But if you reach out to enough people, eventually you're going to find someone that says yes. It's the same for looking for deals. Like you could start cold calling people, and most people are going to slam the phone in your face. But eventually, someone's going to pick up and say, "Yeah, I'll sell you my house." And it really goes for everything I've dealt with, like dealing with contractors, telling telling you something can't be done. I just learned that also, like, everyone, I always thought like these people have all this power and like they're so much smarter than me. And you start to realize these are just normal people, and like, don't be afraid to challenge them. And now it's like I'm in the process of trying to assume a mortgage on the property right now. And the bank, I called like 6 different people at the bank, and they all said, no, it can't be done, it can't be done. But then I read online and on the forums and stuff where people have done it and say it can be done. And so I kept on calling people until I got the answer I wanted. And finally, someone's like, yeah, here's the paperwork. This is how you do it. It can be done. And I couldn't believe it. Like, it makes me want to like reprimand all these other people. Like, why are you going around spreading this false information when it can happen? It's not illegal or anything like that. So, and a lot of it is just because people are lazy, and maybe they're not getting a commission out of it, so they don't care. They're not going to take they're not going to go the extra mile to figure it out for you. So sometimes you got to do that legwork for yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that what that speaks to is basically just like not giving up on something. I mean, that's basically everything that I'm hearing from you right now is like not giving up on something until eventually it comes through. How do you keep yourself motivated after like being denied so many times? I mean, I'm right now, stupid example, but like I'm dealing with like annoying health insurance and getting frustrated and like wanting to just not deal with it anymore. How do you keep going?
Yeah, that is it is hard to stay motivated and keep going. I think what helps me, and this may not work for everyone, but I continue to listen to podcasts that they kind of like they amp me up, like you listen to someone's story and it's like, yeah, I want to go out and like buy a house right now and flip something. And like you get amped up about it. But then like if I don't listen to podcasts or if I don't like look at MLS for a while, I start to get stagnant and feel like, this is never gonna work. But I think you gotta find what works for you and you know, dig deep into yourself and ask you like what gets you excited about this thing in particular. I mean, I guess with health insurance, it's like, I don't know, like what's going to get you excited about health insurance?
Yeah, and that may just be one of those things like you just have to deal with, and it's annoying. But yeah, no, I think that's good advice for that. Like for me, it's like I try to find books that are helpful and they get me excited, and I try to read like when I get up in the morning before I start anything, and I try to invest at least a little bit of time into reading something. And even if it's just like 10 pages that I read, it could completely change my course of my day just because like I was inspired or motivated by it. So yeah, podcast is definitely another way to do that. So I think that that's good advice.
Yeah, and I don't think like podcasts aren't for everyone, right? I also learned a teacher once told me that there's 3 different ways kids learn. There's a visual learner, a kinesthetic learner, and a audible learner. And I found out and was told that I'm an audible learner. So I retain more information when I hear it rather than when I see it or when I'm doing it with my hands. So I kind of grasped onto that and said, okay, I'm going to start listening to audiobooks rather than reading the audiobooks. I'm going to start listening to podcasts. And And the more I do that, I'm noticing that I am retaining a lot more. And so
Hmm.
you want to just play to your strengths. And
Yeah.
so I do encourage everyone to, figure out what's the best way to get them to learn or to focus or to retain information and then use that.
Yeah. That's huge because I mean, it's just thinking about like, I don't know which one I am. I think I'm like a do it type of person. Like, if I'm doing it, that's how I learn the best. But even just to think like all the past things you tried to learn, if you knew which way you learned the best, how much time could you save or how better could you apply that to anything you're learning in the future? So I'm sure there's a test out there that tells you which one you are. I'm sure you could Google it and go find it. So that makes me want to do that after this.
Yeah. And honestly, after I learned that, I kind of felt like disappointed with a lot of my teachers in the past because I feel like there's a lot of teachers out there that just, they follow a rubric and they just hand out worksheets and they treat everybody the same, but really everybody's different and you have to cater to each student and understand their strengths and weaknesses and understand what's going to make them pay attention and retain the information. And I felt like in school for me, I struggled with obviously the ADD thing. And had I known this in the past, I think I probably would have been a lot smarter than I am now. So I wish that more teachers would take that into account.
Yeah, I do think that that's a good point. And then I also just heard myself thinking, like, I'm sure there's tons of people listening to you right now being like, you seem way smarter than I do right now listening to this. So, like, that brings me to like the perception of self and like being self critical and, you know, being hard on yourself and that sort of thing. Like, you said that you struggle with ADD and that's something that like you're aware of. But what about like other self limitations? Is that something that you think about?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of self limitations. I do a lot of self exploration and read about a lot about mental health and stuff like that. It's another thing I'm like obsessed with, I guess you could say. Basically, and it started from recognizing that I had a problem because I wasn't diagnosed with ADD till I was like 20. I knew I had it. I knew there was something wrong with me. Like I couldn't retain information or stay focused like everybody else. And I know a lot of people nowadays think they have ADD or they do have it and they struggle to cope with it. And I've learned some things that work for me that really have like jump started my way of thinking, I guess. And it was discouraging hearing, like, I had trouble holding a job, especially when I was doing like auto body and stuff. People would look at, like, they'd ask me a question and they would like, I'd be thinking, it's like I got racing thoughts. So they'd ask me a question and I'd take a while to respond because I'm not thinking about the question. I was thinking about something else. And then I got to the question in my head and I responded. My response time was delayed, right? So they're looking at me like, is this kid stupid? Like, what's wrong with him? And and then it makes you question yourself. And I I had that a lot growing up was like people thinking they might not outright say like, "Are you stupid?" Which they have done, but a lot of people would think like I'm a pothead or something, and it's like, and I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? Why does it take me a while to respond to people? Why am I slow with the way I think and stuff? And even with like solving a math problem, I'll always get the right answer, but it took me a lot longer because I went about it a different way in my head than the average person would, I guess. So that's what got me into researching, you know, why am I like this? Again, like just Googling, this is my problem. Like, why does it take me long to think? Why does it take me long to respond? How come people think I'm slow or something? And then I read about ADD. Then I went to a doctor. They diagnosed me. They say the only thing to treat it is medication, which I didn't want to do because I'm kind of like a naturalist and don't like to put foreign things in my body and stuff like that. So I just started researching ways to cope with that, and found I really just figured out my own way. Like when I first went into business, like I'd forget to go to a job. Like I would get calls like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Who is this? What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, we talked yesterday. You said you were going to be at my house today," and I would forget because I wasn't writing them down right away. So what I started doing is the second I get a phone call for a job, I got into I built these habits where I have to put it in my phone right away, no matter what I'm doing. If I'm driving, I gotta pull over, I gotta put it in my phone, or else it's gonna go away. So, not only with things like that, but with everyday things in life, I write notes. If I like something or I think about something or I want to do something, I have to write it down. That's a big thing for me is writing things down and writing them down right when you think about it. Don't say, "Oh, I'll write it down in 5 minutes," because then it just goes away. So that's something I do to cope with it. But yeah, there's a bunch of different things. There's like cognitive behavioral therapy, which, I've tried practicing that. I still try to do that. But any little thing you could do helps. But I think it's important to realize because it killed my self esteem, like thinking that there's something wrong with me and like everyone thinks I'm slow and stuff. You finally realize, oh wait, I'm not slow. Like I can still figure things out. I just go about it a different way. And I have to think about how to do things that are more to my advantage, I guess. Like use my strengths, right? So as soon as you find out what your strengths are, it kind of built my confidence back up. Another thing, I have pretty severe sleep apnea, and something I kind of didn't think anything about. But when I got control of that, that made a huge difference in my life as well. Like I've been more alert during the day, I'm more awake, more focused. So just constantly trying to better yourself, both physically and mentally, I think is important.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. We are kind of, getting to the end of our time here. But I can't not ask you about purpose since that's kind of the name of this podcast. Give me any thoughts or your opinion on like what purpose is, or like, I know a lot of, it seems like decisions that you made when you were younger were driven on like money and how much you're getting paid and this and that. How does all that tie in, or is it something that you think about?
It is something I think about a lot. Actually, I always ask myself, like, what is the purpose of life? Is there a purpose to life? And I guess everything is unknown, right? So I used to be in the mindset of like, there is no purpose of life. We're like these little microorganisms, and eventually we're going to die, and then there, there's nothing left, and there's no train of thought. There's there's no purpose, and I don't think that's a healthy way to think. Which is why people probably believe in religion and stuff because it gives you a hope of an afterlife and or a greater being, and I think that's great. Unfortunately, I feel like I can't believe in something that I can't see, hear, or feel. So I've tried. I've tried because I want to. I envy people that believe in religion. I just it doesn't work for me. But I do think like going down a more spiritual path because everything is unknown. You can't say that there's no purpose, but you can't say that there is a purpose. So it puts me in like this gray area where, well, I can't be depressed, but I can't be excited that there's some afterlife. So now it's almost like I just try not to think about it. I just try to be happy in any way I can. And so maybe that's my purpose is just to try and be happy.
Hmm. Are there things that you can do to like to affect your happiness? Like I guess that's something that I think about a lot. And words also, they're all made up, right? The word purpose for me is helpful and important, but that doesn't mean that like maybe it is for everybody. But I think happiness is something maybe that is something people are always chasing or trying to figure out what makes them happy. Is there things that you've noticed that do make you happy or don't make you happy? Just for example, like the things that are supposed to make you happy have not made me happy,
Right.
right? So then I have to go and then find those things that actually make me happy versus are said to make me happy. And I think for me, purpose is finding something that I can do that gives me like a reason to be doing it, which then affects my happiness. So maybe asking in a different way, like happiness, like what affects your happiness, or what have you noticed?
Yeah. So I thought long and hard about that too. Like, what is happiness? And I think people look at obviously like material things, which I think everyone can agree that that's like temporary happiness. So then the other thing is like love, right? Like finding love should make you happy. But love is also just a feeling, right? And a feeling, a deep feeling, don't get me wrong, but it's a transmitter in our brain that makes us, that produces dopamine, makes us feel good, right? But beyond that, I think we're constantly looking for our purpose and happiness and stuff. And I don't think you ever like find this one thing like and have this revelation. I think you have to enjoy the journey. The journey is the happiness. Just the whole process is purpose.
No, I think that that has a lot of truth for me, like enjoying the process and the journey. But I also think that could be something that is anxiety provoking, is not knowing where you're going to go or where the future. So it's like for me a fine balance of like enjoying the moment, but then also not being worried about the future and being in the present. So that in and of itself is like a whole nother conversation and a whole balance of things.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's definitely anxiety provoking. But I think if you didn't have things that gave you anxiety, like you wouldn't know, like you wouldn't know what good is if there wasn't bad, and you wouldn't know what happiness is if there wasn't sadness. So you have to experience both sides of the spectrum, and there's never going to be this perfect paradise. It's always going to be, you're always going to need both to exist, to feel, to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. So we gotta come to an end, but I just want to ask you like what's next for you, or what are you trying to get into next, or speak that into existence.
yeah, so I'm learning the hard way that I don't like working long hours. I want to spend more time doing the things that I enjoy doing. So the next thing for me is trying to put systems in place where my businesses can run themselves. So I am thinking about doing like a different business venture, whether it's opening some little shop or something, having somebody else run it. Or and like I said, I'm looking at getting into a commercial property and basically getting more cash flow to the point where I don't have to work hands on anymore. And I could spend, I'm not looking to live this lavish life and do all these crazy things. I'm just looking to not have to be a slave to the dollar and just travel and make connections and give back. And I think that's what would make me feel the best.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you for sharing all your experiences and being vulnerable and telling us all about the things that you've gotten into. I appreciate your time, and yeah, wish you the best of luck with your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you. And same to you. And we'll have to flip this role around so people can get to know your your side because I think you have a lot of good insight, life in general as well.
Well, thank you. It's interesting seeing, like, I don't know. I feel like people are always really hard on themselves and they don't see all the value in themselves. But that's kind of like what this podcast is for me, is like I'm in real time seeing like all the awesome things that people do and getting to witness it and hopefully reflect some of it back to them and share it with other people.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Working Towards Our Purpose. If you liked today's episode and are interested in more, you can sign up for my Substack newsletter with the link in the show notes, where I share thoughts, tips, and ideas that I'm learning along my journey to help inspire you. The show was produced by Pleasant Podcast at pleasantpodcast.com.